Hey guys, so welcome back. In this video, I'll be trying to explain in detail as to how I made my Sudoku solver. Alright, now this, as you all know, it is made using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Alright, so I'll be showing you a small sample of what it does and how it works. Okay, we have a row of numbers on the right hand side. You can take any number you want and input that into the board. And this board will make sure that it follows the rules of Sudoku. So say for example, I try to repeat one in the same row, it will show an error saying number is being repeated on the same row and I cannot insert that. Similarly, if I try to insert in the same column, I get a similar error. Even if I try to insert in the same subsquare, I'll get this error, okay, saying that I'm repeating it in the same compartment. All right, so it follows all the rules. So now basically you can input as many other numbers as you want. All right, say for example, insert these numbers. Now you have two options here. You can either do solve or speed solve. Okay. Now, like the way we solve this, we use recursion and backtracking. It's a very fast way to solve this. So what the solve function will do is it will slow it down a bit by adding a 25 millisecond delay between each backtracking method. Okay, so like we can visualize as to what is going on at least a bit. So if I go to solve, like you can kind of see as to what is going on, right? If a number does not belong to one place, it'll just backtrack to the last empty square and like change the number over there and move forward. All right, now that is solved. Now if I go to new board, I'll get an entirely new board to work with. Now say for example, I can insert some random numbers anywhere I want, over here and here, and let's put 4 here. Now speed solve will basically solve it instantly. Okay, so if I do speed solve, there you go, it's solved. Okay, so yeah, now that is basically how this Sudoku solver works. Now, all of you who are attempting to make this along with me, it is necessary that you guys at least know the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. All right, and apart from that, you should also know how to solve a Sudoku using backtracking and recursion, which is the most optimal way to solve it. Okay, if you guys don't know that, I'll be leaving a card on the top right hand side corner. Like it has a link to a video in which I explain the entire method as to how we solve Sudoku. All right, like using recursion backtracking. So let's start. So first of all, I'll go to my VS Code. Okay, I already have a folder named as Sudoku. All right, now inside Sudoku, basically I have some files. I have my index.html. Now this will be my main HTML file. I have index.css, my main CSS file, and index.js, which will be my main JavaScript file. Okay, and this is the picture what I'll add as my background. Okay, so if you guys want, I'll be leaving a link to this picture down below, or you can use any picture of your choice. Like it's completely up to you. Okay, so let's start with the HTML part. Now to get the basic template for HTML, I'll just press exclamation and I'll have an option for emit abbreviation. I'll enter that and I'll get the basic outline of HTML. Now, if you guys don't have this installed in, you can either do all of this by hand or like just input the important stuff like HTML, head, body, and all that. Okay, so I'll change the title to Sudoku solver. Okay, now we have to link our CSS and JavaScript, right? So I'll just do link rel equal to sorry, it should be style sheet, and href, which will be my path, will be to my index.css. All right, now the same thing I should repeat it for my index.js as well, because I want to link both of them, right, to this. So over here, link source for JS, it's always source. Okay, source will be index.js as usual. And I'll just write differ here and we'll end with the script. Okay, it's actually a script here, it's not link. All right, let me take this off. There's a problem with autocomplete. This head should actually come after this, right? Don't need this head. Okay, I'll just do script, and this one should also be script. Okay, so now we have linked both our HTML file and our JS file. All right. Now let's move on into our body. Now I'll be giving an ID for everything because in JavaScript we'll be like attaining or getting objects by their ID. Okay. So I'll just do ID equals body. Okay. Body has an ID of body. All right. Now I'll make a class called main, which will also have an ID of main. All right. Now inside this main class is where everything will be happening. First of all, what do we want? We want a heading, right? We want a heading called Sudoku solver. So what I'll be doing is that I'll just add that. So I'll do h1 dot heading. I'll get that. And I'll just write Sudoku solver. All right. This gets me the heading. And as usual, I also need an ID, right? ID equals to heading. Now, apart from that, okay, now here our heading is done. All right. Now we'll have a class called active, which will store all the main components. By main components, I mean this section right here, your solve, speed, solve, new board, your main board, and your numbers on the side. All right. So we'll have a class called active. So I'll just write dot active. All right. Dot active. Now inside of this is where we'll be entering all that. Now inside this we'll again have a class called dot main buttons. Now this will basically have all our main buttons inside of it. So I'll just do dot solver. So instead of this, I'll just give one h1, right? And I'll give it as solve. Okay. Now let's copy this for the others. So apart from solver, we have speed solve and we have new board, right? So I'll just be naming this speed up. All right. Now I'll be saving this as new board. Okay. Speed solve over here and new board over here. All right. Now again, I need IDs for this. So I'll just be putting those in. Just make sure you do all this. All right. So now that's done. Okay. Now we made all our buttons on the left. Now what do we need? We need our main board, right? We need our main board. Now in the beginning, our main board will be empty because we'll be making our main board using JavaScript. Okay, like we won't be making our main board using HTML because we have to empty our board, insert numbers into our board and do all that. And all that is much more convenient to do in JavaScript than HTML, right? So I'll just make a class called board over here. Okay, again, ID of board. Now this will like remain empty as it is. Okay. Now after this, we'll need a class to store these numbers, right, to the right. So we'll make a class for that. So what we'll do is we'll just do dot numbers. Again, we'll have an ID of numbers. Now inside of this, I'll be storing all the numbers in paragraph tags. So all of them will have a class called nums. However, the ID will be corresponding to the particular number, right? So here your ID will be 1 because the number is 1, right? Similarly, we need for all numbers up till 9, right? So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now just change all of these. Now I have to change all of this, right? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay. Now all that is done. Now what can we do? Now we need to also make a class for our warnings. Okay. By what do I mean by warnings? As I said, if you repeat a number on the same row, column, or whatever, like we'll get warnings on the side, right? So we need one warning if it's being repeated on the row. We need another warning if it's being repeated on the column. And we need a last warning if it is being repeated in these individual subsquares. All right. So we'll make those warnings now. Of course, like in the starting, like we'll set their opacity as 0. We'll set their opacity as 1 only if we make an invalid insertion. Okay, but we'll look at all that later. So for now, I'll just do dot all warnings. All right. Now inside of this, again, I'll make a p tag. I'll just name this warning 1. Now warning 1 will be basically for the row, right? So again, id warning 1. Now I need these in 2 separate lines, right? So I'll just do number is b. Now I'll put a br tag to go to the next line. Then I'll write repeated in the same row. All right. Now this is for the row. Similarly, we have to make for the column and the compartment. Now this will be warning 2. Even here the ID will be warning 2. All right. Here instead of row, I'll put column. Now warning 3, even in the ID, I'll change it. Now here number is being repeated in the same. I'll just put this as sub square. Okay, I'll just be calling them as sub square. All right. Now cut the spelling UA. All right. Now we did up till here. Now how do we see as to what we made? Right. Now if you go to your extensions, you can install something called live server. Okay. There's something called live server which you can install. Now if you install live server, you'll have this option right here. All right. Like over here, you have an option called go live. If you select that option, it'll basically start a live server for you on port 5500, right? So now this is basically what our page looks like right now. Obviously, it's like this because we didn't add any CSS. Okay, we didn't add any CSS. Of course, it'll look like this. So now we'll make it from this to this. All right. So, okay, now it's time to add some CSS because CSS is very important. Okay, for styling. So now let's go back. Now I'll remove all of this. Let's go to CSS. All right. Now, as default for all, now star basically means all. I'll just set margin as 0. I'll also set padding as 0. All right. Now after this, we have to make some arrangements to the body. Now background image, right? Background image, as I said, I already selected one image. I'll just be adding that numbers or JPG. All right. Now background size, cover, and background repeat. Now this basically means that if the screen is too large, this background will basically repeat itself. Okay, so we don't have any empty spaces as such. Again, I'll set my width as 100% and even my height as 100%. All right. Now, what do? We can set padding top of 4VH because we need some padding. Then I'll do display flex. Okay, because I'll be using flexbox for this. Then justify content center and align item center. Now this basically done so that everything under the body or every subclass of body, it will be centrally aligned. Okay. Now again, text align center because we have a heading which we have to align. Then I'll just do overflow X hidden. Now in case there is some overflow X and we have a scroll bar down, to avoid that, we'll just do overflow X hidden. All right. Then I'll do margin left of about 4.5 VW. Okay. Now let's see as to how it is. It should become a bit better. As you can see, we got the background, but also still the same, right? We have to adjust this. It's fine. We'll fix that. Now, we did for the body. Now for the heading. Now, if you guys remember, the heading is this main Sudoku solver, right? We'll just add styles to the heading. So I'll just do dot heading, right? Font size, I'll put as 4 VW, right? Then margin right to 9 VW. Of course, like these are my own values. You guys can input your own values and like experiment with them. No, I'm just using these values because they work the best for me. Okay. Right. Let's save and see. As you can see, we got this in a bigger font, right? Okay. Now let's move on. Let's compare this with our original one. Okay, we want this in white, right? we want to send white. We'll fix that. If we want, what we can do is that in the body, okay, so means I'll say one shortcut, right? In this, everything is in white, right? So in our body itself, we can set our font to white. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go inside our body. Okay, at the end, we'll just add font as white, or sorry, color as white. Okay, now this should basically change everything to white. There you go. Now it looks much better, right? Okay, now let's move forward. Now let's move on to our active. Right now, our active is basically this entire region right here. Right. So inside of active, what should we do? Let me go down dot active. Again, I'll be using flex here. So display flex, then justify content center, because I want everything to be centrally aligned, right? Now I save it. It looks like this, right? It is centrally aligned horizontally. Okay. Now we'll go down. Now dot numbers p. Now this will basically access all the numbers that we input. Right now, numbers is our main class and p is basically our subclass inside of numbers. Right now, this will accept, I mean, like this line right here will change the properties of the p tags, of all the p tags inside numbers. Okay, now what do we want to do to this? First of all, padding top, we need some padding to this. I'll just do 0.5 VH. All right. Now flex 1, so they all have equal space. Now I need some border. I'll just do 2 pixels of solid RGBA. Again, I'm putting in a color of my choice. You guys can use your colors. Oh wait, I'll just put this as white because that's much easier. I'll just do solid white. All right. Just for simplicity's sake. Anyways, width, okay, width should be 2.7 viewers width, and even your height should be 2.7 viewers width. Okay, now font size 2 viewers width, and border radius we need to set it to 20%. Now the reason being is that, like you see over here, we have, means like the edges aren't straight, right? Means they aren't exactly squares, they have some curvature to them. So that border radius thing is basically used for that. Okay, now I'll set some margins. 10 pixels, 0 pixels, 5 pixels, and 50 pixels. Now, if you see a margin in a 4-number format, it is basically top, right, bottom, left. Okay, so yeah. Anyways, now text align center. Now let's see as to how it looks. As you can see, like this actually looks good, right? So we finished our numbers section. All right. Now let's move forward. Now what do we have next? Now if you see, let me take this out real quick. Over here, if I hover over the numbers, I have a small pinkish color, right? So we'll add that. So what we'll do is that we'll go here and we'll do dot nums hover, just 1 semicolon, or like 1 colon rather. Now when it hovers, what do we want? We want the background color to be light coral, okay, and cursor to be a pointer. Okay, so as you can see now, if you hover over the numbers, the colors change, right? Look how nice that looks. All right, now let's move forward. Now we need the main buttons, right? By main buttons, I mean this thing right here, solve, speed, solve a new board. We need them to appear like this, right? Now I have to agree that this animation is a bit hard, all right? But if you guys want, you can make this exact same animation, or else you can make an animation of your choice. Okay, so I'll just do dot main buttons. Okay, over here again, flex 1 for equal space, display flex direction column, and justify content center. All right, margin top of 5 VH because you need space between each individual button, and we'll set flex to, or wait, we don't need this because you already added flex 1, right? Now let's save and see. As you can see, it came like this, right? Now what do we do? Now we have to set the individual buttons, right? So we'll select all of them. As you can see over here, the classes of the individual buttons are solver, speed up, and new board, right? So we'll manipulate them now. Dot solver, comma dot speed up, comma dot new board. All right. Now over here, font size 1.5 EW. All right. Padding of 5 pixels, margin bottom of 5 EW. Because as I said, this margin is for the individual spaces between each button, okay, and like that is given so that they don't appear stuck to each other. Now margin right, we'll also give that as 5 VW because we want some space from the board, right? As you can see over here, we need like this space from the board so that like it won't be stuck to the board. All right, so we'll need that. Margin right 5 VW. Then transition. Now we are adding this because we'll do an animation, right? Position will be relative, and we'll do overflow as hidden. Okay, let's see as to how this looks right now. As you can see, they have some space, right? Now all we have to do is add this lighting animation. Now this is a bit complicated, but again, as I said, it ain't too hard. Okay, dot solver before, we'll add a before object to everything. Dot speed up after, before itself. We'll do after this. All right. Then dot new board before. All right. Now what do? We do content as an empty space because if you're dealing with any before or after attributes, they always need some content inside of them. Okay, like they won't work if you don't have a content. So for me, I don't have a content because all I'm adding are these two small rectangular like squares on the sides, right? On the top left and the bottom right. So I'll be making them manually. So of course I'll do content as empty. Now position absolute. Now top 0, left 0, because that is where I want my rectangles to be. Width 10 pixels, height also 10 pixels, right? Now border top, I'll be doing it as 2 pixels solid, light cyan, okay, because I like that. And even for border bottom, I'll be doing the exact same thing, right? So border bottom, I'll do that. All right. Now transition 0.5 seconds over here. Again, this is for the animation. Let's see. As you can see, we have it like this, right? We have it like this. We'll fix that. All right, let's see if we did something wrong. Width, height. Now like everything looks right. Okay, now let's move forward. Let's move on to the after aspects. All right, so I'll just be selecting all this, going forward. All right, now again, content will be empty, position absolute. Now here we need right as 0 and bottom as 0 because we are inserting in the bottom right element, right? Like in the bottom right space. Width of 10 pixels, height of 10 pixels. Now what do? Border bottom. I'll just copy this same thing. We need border bottom and we need border right in this. Okay, so changes to border right. All right, here again, transition of 0.5 seconds. Okay, let's see as to how this looks. As you can see, this worked fine, but over here we have some issue. Let's see what we did wrong. Top 0, left 0. Oh, this should actually be border left. Okay, not border bottom. It should be border left. Let's see now. I think it should work now. There you go. It works, right? Now all we need is some spacing between them. Right. So we'll add that spacing. No worries. Now we'll just do the hover animation. Right. do the hover animation. So what we'll do is that dot solver hover. All right. Dot new board hover dot speed up hover. Okay. Now background color, we'll put that as light cyan. Then color black. Now this is for the font. Okay, our font will be black. Box shadow, well, we'll do 0 0 50 pixels and light cyan for the box shadow as well. And cursor pointer. Okay, because we having the option to select. Let's see as to how this looks. All right, now it just looks like this, right? Now we need some more space to be there. So what can we do? We can basically do something over here. We'll do dot solver hover before. Okay, as I said, this might be a bit advanced, but this is just so that we have that line effect. All right, now this will be dot speed up, then this will be dot new board. All right, apart from that, we need the same thing for after as well. So over here after, and over here also after. Now all we have to do is ensure that we take the maximum height and width. So we'll just do height as 100% and we'll do our width as 100%. All right, we'll save this. Now let's see as to how this looks. Let's reload this. And as you can see, now we have that lining animation, right? How it goes through. Now we still have this issue about the spacing, right? The space isn't enough. So what we can do is that basically, let me go back. Where is my... Okay, let's go back. In this part, we can give more padding, I guess. We can give padding as, I don't know, 5VH. Let's keep padding as 5VH and see. It's kind of fine, right? But it became a bit too big. We'll make it a bit smaller. There you go. It looks much better, right? So yeah, now we made these. Now the only thing remaining is the board. Okay, but before that, we'll be dealing with this warning, right? All these warnings should be shown only if we make a wrong input, right? We need all these warnings to show only if we make the wrong input. So here's what we'll do. Okay, first of all, we'll go to our CSS. Let's go up above here. Dot all warnings. Right, now this is the parent class that holds all the warnings. Again, display flex direction of column, right? Align item center, then margin left of 2 VW, then margin top of 3 VW, and let's do a font size of 2.3 VW, and let's do a flex of 0.7 because we don't want it to be too large, right? Word wrap, of course, break word, because we don't want it to exceed the screen and like just go, right? So yeah, that's basically it. Let's save it. Okay, now what do we want? We want none of the warnings to be shown at first, right? As I said, we want the warnings to be shown only if we made a mistake. So in the beginning, like no warnings will be shown. So what do? We'll set all of their opacities to 0. All right. So let's just do dot warning 1, comma dot warning 2, and warning 3. Right. Now what do? Color red because I want their font to be red. All right. Color red. Now font weight bold. Flex 1, so they take the maximum space. Flex 1 and opacity to 0. Okay, now apart from this, as I said, we want a particular animation. So we want the animation to, see, fade in and then fade out. So how do we do that? We can make a new animation for this. So we make a separate class for the animation. So dot one anim, just name it like this. Okay, dot one anim. We'll copy paste this. All right, one2 anim and var3 anim. Okay, over here animation, animate 3 seconds forwards. All right, now we have to make this particular animation called animate. So let's make that. We'll use keyframes for this. Keyframes animate. All right, now what do we want? At 0%, we want the opacity to be 0. Okay, then at 50%, we want the opacity to be 1. Then at 100%, we again want the opacity to be 0, right? Now this is what will give it the fade in fade out effect, because starting opacity will be 0, halfway it will be at full opacity, then it will again lose its opacity and go all the way back to 0. Okay, now if I save it, you shouldn't be able to see that. All right, and there you go. You won't be able to see it now. All right, now we have to make the board. Okay, now before I make the board, I have to explain a few things. All right, so let me just do that real quick. Now, let me take this board right here. Okay, as you can see, the outer edges of the board and of each compartment, they are thicker than the other lines. It is very important for you to note this, right? The outer edges of the board and these lines in between are thicker than the other normal lines. So you have to take care of that. Okay, so like just remember that. So now for board, what should I do? Let's do it over here, right? Okay, dot board. Now this is our parent board class, which will house all these squares. Now these small sections, I'll just be referring to them as squares. Okay, so now padding top of 2.5 VW. Okay, then display flex wrap. Flex wrap we wanted to wrap. All right, because you don't want any screen imbalances. Align content. Flex chart. Now here we'll align everything to the beginning of our flex box. Okay, like just so that it looks good. Again, width of 35 VW and even height of 35 VW. Okay, now this is our main parent class which contains all the squares. Now we have to take care of the squares individually, right? So dot square, okay? Padding top, 1 VH, all right? Width, 3.4 VW. Even your height will be 3.4 VW, right? Then font size 2 VW, because you don't want the squares to be too big, right? Margin 0, because our squares need no margins. Then border, I'll just put this to 1.3 pixels solid white. Okay, now color, we don't need the color, right? Yeah, we'll set the color to black. Now why is that? Because the numbers inside the squares, like they should be in black, right? Like it'll just look good that way. Again, it's up to you, but I'll just set the color to black. All right, now we made up till here. Now again, what should we do? We need the hover option, right? Because when we hover over this, we need this particular light blue to come. So what we'll do is we'll just go down, dot square, hover. I'll just change background color to light sky blue. All right, and cursor to pointer. All right, now we'll also make another class called solve color. Now this might not make sense much right now, but once we get to the JavaScript portion, you will understand all of this like nicely. All right, background color light green. Now the reason we are doing this is, as I said over here, when we select and we insert an element, we want that box to be in light green, right? So we'll just name that as solved color. All right, like that class will be named as solved color. I'll just put that light green. Okay. Now we need different classes for border bottom, border right, border left, and border up. Okay. So basically, I'll say why. All right. Now, say for example, we go to this particular square. Okay, we go to this particular square. We need the border top and border left to be thick. Right. When we go to this square, we need only the border top to be thick, and so on. Right now, if we go to this square, we need border top and right to be thick. Okay. So to do that in a more efficient way, again, all that will be in JavaScript. I'm just making the classes used for it right now. Okay, so dot border bottom. All right, I'll just put this as border bottom. All right, 4 pixels solid white. I'll copy this exact same thing for the rest. All right, now this will be border left, this will be border right, and this will be border top. All right, now these classes will just be used to add the border to our given square. Okay, now this is border bottom, this will be border left, border right, and border top. All right. Okay, it's made a small mistake here. It's border. All right. I can't spell border, and over here also border. All right. So now we did this. Now what do we have to do? Now we need a class which will give the color of selection. As you can see here, when we select it, we want this light orange color to come. Okay, when we select it. So what we'll do is that we'll make a class for that. So dot selected will be its name, background color of light salmon. Okay, now that is done, and that's basically all of our CSS. We don't have anything else. All right, now let's see as to how it looks as of now. As you can see, it looks like this, right? We have this entire portion for our board, which we'll be making soon. Okay, so as you can see, all these hover effects work, right? We forgot to add the delete button, right? Over here, we need one delete button to delete the elements. So let's add that real quick. We'll go back to index.html. We'll just do p class equal to delete. Even your ID will be delete. And it'll be just holding del, right? Let's see. And there you go, we have that also now, right? But this is not in our, okay, class should be nums actually, sorry. Let's see now, and there you go, it works, right? So now we have to make the board, and now is where we'll start using JavaScript. All right. Okay, let's start with the JavaScript part. The first thing is we have to make a board, right? We have to make a board to store our arrays, or like to store the Sudoku, right? So it'll be a 9x9 board. So I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right. Then I'll leave a comma here and copy this 9 more times. As you can see, now our board is made. All right. Now what can we do? Now we'll store a variable. Okay, we'll just leave some space here. Okay, we'll store a variable, right, called num to add. And what is this exactly? So now basically over here, when we select any number from here, okay, like say for example, I select 4 and I want to insert 4 into our board. 4 is basically our num to add, right? Because we want to add 4 into our board. So we will store 4 inside num to add. So we will make a variable num to add for that. Okay. Now let's start with the main function. Window.onLoad. Right. So as soon as the window loads, what should you do? Make a function. Now inside this, we'll call a function called makeBoard. Now this makeBoard function will be in charge of making the board. Okay, so now let's make that function first. Okay, now let's do function make board. All right. Now what should we do? First of all, before making a board, we have to empty our board, right? Because why I'm saying that is like, say for example, we have a solved board. Now, when we select new board, what should we do? We have to first empty our board. Then after emptying our board, we should make the board again, right? So we will call a function inside this as well called empty board. Okay, let's make empty board now. All right, like we'll go step by step. All right, let's make empty board now. So what we'll do is we'll just do function empty board. All right. So how do we empty board? First of all, we have to select all the individual squares, right? So I'll just do let squares be equal to document dot query selector all dot square. So what this will do is basically select all the classes inside our HTML which has a class name of square. Okay, so basically it will select all the 81 squares of the Sudoku board. All right. Now after this, I'll just do for let I equal to 0, I less than squares of length will always be 81. All right. So I less than 81 and I plus plus. All right. Now inside what should we do? We have to remove the squares, right? So squares of I dot remove. So now this will remove the square class from within the HTML and therefore the Sudoku board will cease to exist. Alright, as simple as that. Now after we do this, as I said, now like say for example our Sudoku is solved and we have like something like, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Even in our board over here, it'll be that solved values itself, right? We have to reset the entire board as well to 0. So what we'll do is for let I equal to 0, I less than 81. Oh, sorry, I less than 9 because it's a J loop as well we need, okay? Then for let I equal to, or rather J equal to 0, J less than 9, J plus plus. What should we do? Board of ij equal to 0. All right, as simple as that. Now, okay, so now this basically like empties everything, right? Let's see as to, okay, we forgot to put upper quotes over here. All right. Okay. So now we need some variables. Okay. We need some variables. So I'll say what variables we need. Now, our first variable will be index 1 and index 2. Var index 1 and var index 2. Now, what will these be? Now, say for example, we want to insert an element somewhere. Okay, like say for example, I want to insert 5. For example, over here. Okay, what will be the xy coordinates of this square? It will be 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right now, this square is at 0, 5. So it is necessary to get the coordinates of a square to add a number into that particular square. So when I add 5 and I press over here, what is happening is it will basically get the coordinate of this particular square and insert 5 into that, right? So index 1, index 2 will just be used for that. We'll also have fault 1, fault 2 and fault 3. Right, now these will be for the faults. As I said, if a number repeats on the same row, it will be fault 1. If a number is repeated on the same column, it will be our second fault. And if the number gets repeated in the same subsquare, it will be our third fault. Okay, and after this, we'll also have a value of bool is solved. Or like no need of bool, we'll just do var is solved is equal to false. Now this is solved thing will just inform us as to if the Sudoku board is solved or not. Okay, like in the starting, of course, the board won't be solved, so by default is solved will be false. Okay, now let's go back to our empty board function over here. Now after emptying the board, we have to reset all the values, right? So fault 1 equal to 0, We'll just do this to everything else. So even fault 2 and fault 3, right? And again, is solved will again be false. All right. So this we made empty board. Now let's go back to the function called make board, okay, because we have to make it. Okay, so first, as I said, we'll call empty board to empty the entire board out. Okay, now let's go to make board. Now what I'll do is I'll make a variable called id, right? Let id be equal to 0. Now id will basically be standing for the different ids of the squares. Okay, now we'll see if we need this in the future. I'm just making this and keeping. Okay, like let's see if we need this. Anyways, for let I equal to 0, I less than 81. All right, I plus plus. Now I less than 81 because we have to make 81 squares, right? We have to make 81 squares for our Sudoku board. Now instead of this, what should we do? We'll just do const id now is equal to string of I. Okay, now if you notice here, right, I will always be an integer, right, that goes all the way up from 0 up till 80. Now we want to insert this particular number as an ID into our HTML. Okay, so as I said, inside our HTML, we'll have a board. Okay, we'll have a parent class called board, which will hold all the 81 squares. Now each square will have an ID of their own. So for example, the first square will have an ID of 0. The second square will have an ID of 1, and so on. Okay, while setting the IDs for the squares, they should be in the string format, because like we can't use integers in HTML, right? So this line is basically for that. Const id num is equal to string I. It is basically to convert it into a string. Okay, I'll again do let square equal to document dot create element. Okay, we'll make a new element called p, which will be a paragraph tag to store our squares. All right, now square dot set text, sorry, square dot text content. Oh wait, let me just change this. Yeah, square dot text content, it'll be empty, right? Because like in the beginning, the squares will be empty, like the squares won't have any numbers inside of it. Then square dot class list dot add square, right? So basically to each one of these squares, we are adding the class name of squares so that it will inherit all of this. As you can see in CSS, we made a class called square, right, which has all of these values inside of it, height, width, margin, and all that. So we'll basically add a square class to all the squares made, just so that it inherits all of those. All right, so now after this, I'll just do square dot id is equal to id num. All right, okay, so we set the square id to id num. Now here's what we have to do after that. Like you remember when I said, when we make each square, we have to adjust the borders accordingly, right? So I'll be explaining that as we go on. Okay, so over here, if I is more than equal to 0, right, and I is less than 9, right, what can we do? We can just basically say square dot class list dot add border up. All right, border up. Now why is that? So basically what we are saying over here is that, see, if you see our board, these are the, like this is basically our first row. Okay, and if you see all the squares in our first row, their upper border is darkened. Okay, like it's dark white, or like it's more thicker than the others. Okay, now these are our indexes from 0 up till 8, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So for all these squares, we'll add the thick upper border. Now that's exactly what we're doing. We'll add a class called border up. Now if you remember the class border up that we made, where is that again? The class border up we made, it'll basically Oh, sorry, it's border top. I'll just change this to border up. All right, like it's just easier. The class border up we made, it is basically setting the border top to 4 pixels. Now 4 pixels is what makes it thick. All right. So let's go to our board and see how it works right now. Of course, it's like it's not made because we are not calling the function anywhere. Okay, like we'll do that at the end. All right. So where were we? Okay, index.html over here. Now, what do we have to do? Now, after this, I'll do if I is more than equal to 72 and I is less than equal to 81. Okay, I is more than equal to 72 or less than equal to 81. What I can do is that I can just do square dot classless dot add border bottom. Okay, again, border bottom will make sure that our border bottom is thick. Okay, so for this last row, 72 to 81, it'll basically make sure that the border at the bottom will be thick. Okay, now what? Now let's move forward. Let's put semicolons after all of this. Okay, yeah. Now after this, if I plus 1, now all these are a bit of calculations which we have to do. All right, is equal to 0. What can we do? We can just do square dot classless dot add border right. Now this right, I plus 1 mod 9, it will only be equal to 0 when we are going through all of these, or like this area right here. Okay, this area right here, this column I plus 1 mod 9, because if you see, this square is at index 8, right? 8 plus 1, 9 mod 9 is 0. So we'll have a border right over here. This index is, I would guess, 17. 17 plus 1, 18 mod 9 is 0, right? We'll again add one border right. Now this is for that. All right, hopefully you guys understand. Now our next one, if I mod 9 is equal to 0, I'll just copy the same thing. What do? We'll add border left, right? We'll add border left. Now this is again for this area, right? I mod 9 equal to 0. Now this is at the 0th index, so it'll be 0 mod 9, that is 0. 9th index, 9 mod 9 is 0. 18th index, 18 mod 9 is 0, and so on, right? So we'll add a border left to all of these squares, right? Now what will we do? Now we have to add the same thing for a few more. Okay, so just copy this, and over here, instead of this, I'll just write if id is more than 17, right, and id is less than 27. Now this is not an entire condition. I'll do this, or, right, I'll do an or over here. id is more than equal to 44 and id is less than 54. Okay, it's actually more than 44 or more than equal to. Okay, now what will this make sure? This will make sure to add these borders right here. As you can see, we have one thick border right here and one thick border right here, right? Now this condition will basically add that. You can check it if you want. I won't be explaining that in detail now, or else we won't have much time to complete. Okay, now we'll do the same thing for, I'm sorry, we have to add border bottom over here. Okay, not border right, we have to add border bottom. Like it counts these borders, this one and this one. Now we have to add for the border right. So for the border right, it'll just be, let me take this off. It'll basically be id plus 1 mod 9 is equal to 3. Okay, and here also id plus 1, take this off, id plus 1 mod 9 should be equal to 6. Again, like this might not make sense when you look at it directly. However, if you work it out, like you'll understand as to how this works, right? Now this is border right, So for this right border over here, so for all these squares, we'll add one thick right border. Similarly, for all these squares as well, we'll add this thick right border. Right. So now we finished the deal with the borders. Okay. Now we'll just do ID plus plus to go forward. Okay. Now remember we letter ID over here, right? Letter ID is over here. So ID will basically be in charge of in which square we are. So at the beginning we'll be at the 0th square, right? And then we'll move up. So starting ID is 0, then we'll move ID forward. Okay. Now what do? Now we made the squares, right? Now we have to add the squares to the parent child of board. So we'll use something called funcID. Now we have to make a function called funcID. I'll say what that's used for. So over here, we'll just make a function, right? Function of funcID. Now what is this used for? This takes ID as an argument and it will just return document dot get element by ID. Okay, get element by ID of ID. Now instead of entering in this entire statement every single time, we can just use this function. Okay, so that like it's much shorter. All right. So where were we? Over here, right? Yeah, making the board. So now what do? We have to add our squares to the board, right? So I'll just do func ID of board. Right now our ID of board is board itself. Dot append child. Okay. Dot append child square. So we'll append this square to the board. All right. Now let's see if as this works. Let me go back and refresh it. Okay, doesn't work. Okay, so over here it's supposed to be get element by ID. Okay, not get elements by ID. Get element by ID. Let's run this and see. Let's just go to inspect and see as to what the problem is. It's reading remove. Okay, I think in remove, like over here when we're emptying the board, right? I'm always doing 1 less than 81, right? What if the board is not yet made? Because while we are loading the function, the board is not made. So this loop will run 81 times and will run squares of I dot remove. But there are no squares which we can remove, right? So we'll just do here to solve that squares dot length. Okay, we'll do squares dot length. Let's see if that fixes it, and that does fix it. Okay, and there you go. We get this board like this. Okay, it's a bit right aligned, but you guys can fix that using like your CSS. Okay, like just shift it towards the left. Okay, so now that's it. We got the board. Okay, we got the board made. The hover effect is also set. All we have to do is we have to insert the numbers into the board, right? Now here, even though I'm like selecting the numbers, they're not being selected. So we'll fix all of that right now. Okay, we'll fix all of those right now. So let's go over here. Okay, so what should we do first? We'll first deal with the selecting bit. Okay, so I'll go into our this function, this onload. Okay, I will go to our onload function first. Now I'll say why. Now we'll go into this onload function to make the selecting portion of our numbers. So like you see here, when you select it, this color should appear on the number, right? And we like need some things to do like that. So we'll do all of that in our onload function. Okay. Okay. So now we can also add the functionality of this button right here first, right? Like before we deal with this, let's deal with this button called new board. So when we select new board, we need a new board to get made, right? So all we can do for that is we can just do something like funcID, right? New board dot add event listener. We'll add an event listener. We'll give it the event of click. If it is clicked, we'll make a new board, right? I'll just call the function make board. and it'll make a new board. As simple as that. Okay. Now let's deal with the selecting bit. For let I equal to 0, I less than equal to 9, I plus plus. Okay. Now over here, what should we do? We have to see which number is being selected, right? So we'll add an event listener for that as well. So func id numbers dot add event listener, click, because you want to know when it gets clicked, and we'll perform a function. Now this function will do the following for us. Okay. Now what should we do? Here, say for example, I select 4. When I click on 4 again, 4 should be deselected, right? So we'll do that first. So we'll go over here, we'll deal with that. So if this dot class list dot contains selected. Remember, we made a class in CSS called selected, right? So if a number is selected, it'll be light salmon, right? Now, if we find the class list inside of the square, like inside of each of the numbers, it means that it's selected. So now we have to deselect them, right? So what we'll do, we'll just do this dot class list dot remove selected. All right, that's it. And num to add will be equal to undefined. Now, since we deselected it, like right now we have no number to add, right? So it'll be undefined. Okay. Now we'll do the exact same thing for the other case. Else, if there is no number selected, or here, see. So say for example, I want to select 5. Right, I selected 5 like this. But say for example, I already selected 4. Okay, 4 is already selected, and now I want to select 6. What should happen is that 4 should get deselected, right? And 6 should automatically be selected. So what I'll do is I'll first deselect everything else. So for let I equal to 0, I less than equal to 9, I plus plus, I will deselect everything else. So func id numbers dot children of I, which are the squares, dot class list dot remove selected. So I'll remove selected from all of those number squares. Okay. And after that, what I will do, I will exit the for loop, and I will just do this dot class list dot add selected, which is the number we selected now, right? Like this is basically the number that we selected now. We'll add the selected class to that. We'll just do num to add equal to func id of numbers dot children I dot inner html. Children, oops, sorry, function of numbers all should come outside the bracket. Dot children I dot inner html, right? So what this will do is that our numbers, right? Numbers are basically this entire thing. It contains all the numbers from 1 up till 9 and even this delete option. From that, it will select the children I, basically the one which we selected. So like say for example, I selected 6. It will go inside 6 and it will get the value of 6. The value of 6 it will get by doing dot inner html. And the value of 6 we'll add to num to add. All right. So now let's see if this works. Okay, now this is our board which we're doing right now. I select 4. Okay, it's still not working. Let's see what happened. Okay, 4 is not being selected. Right. So let's see as to where we messed up. Okay, so I guess I figured out what's wrong. The numbers aren't being selected, right? So it should be something over here. Okay, there you go. It should be func id dot children, right? Dot children of I dot add event listener, right? Because you want to add event listeners to every children and not just to the parent class itself. Now it should work. As you can see, I selected 5 and it is selected. Now say for example, I want to select 1. Everything else will get deselected and 1 will be selected. Okay. So we figured out this selecting area. Okay. Now we have to just figure out as to how we can insert them into the board. All right. So for this, we'll again go back down to the make board function, right? Because we're inserting them into the board. Now, what do we do here? Now what we'll do is that func id of board dot children of I, this is not outside, dot children of I dot add event listener click, right? Because it has to know where we are clicking inside of the board. Dot click, and just do function and over here. Okay. Now, so say for example, I choose 4 right here and I'm inserting it over here. So it has to get information about this particular square first, right? So we'll first get that information. Okay. So what I'll do is that I'll just do const num id, which will be parsing. So we'll basically convert it to an integer, right? Func id of board dot children I dot id plus 1. All right. Now what is this? This will basically contain our ID of like in which square we are. Okay. This will basically contain the ID of in which square we are. So like say for example, we choose this square right here. Okay. What will the ID be? The ID will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? It will be 6. These are 6 square. Similarly, we select this for example. What will our ID be? It will be 9, then 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Right. So this ID will basically hold that value. Now from this ID, we should find out the row and column in which the square is. Basically, we have to find out the x and y coordinates of the square. So what we'll do, if num ID mod 9 is equal to 0. Now this is just complete mathematics. If you guys can attempt to understand, it's good, or you can just write this down. Okay. Math.floor, right? We'll just do num id by 9, right? And this is for this particular case. And index 2 will just be equal to num id mod 9 minus 1, I believe. All right. Now this is only if num id mod 9 is equal to 0. That is if it is divisible by 9. Otherwise, we have another condition for index 1 and 2. Okay. Now index 1 and 2 will basically be holding our values, right, of our like of the square on the board. Okay. Otherwise, index 1 will just be math.floor of num id minus 1 by 9, and index 2 will just be equal to 8. Okay. Again, this might seem a bit complex at first, but just sit and work it out, right? Like you'll understand as to how this works. Okay. Now this will basically give us as to the x and y coordinates of our square on the board. Basically, it'll inform us as to in which row and which column it is. Okay. Now, what will we do? Now, so say for example, I pick up an element 5 and I click on this square. I want 5 to be inserted here, right? So what I'll do is if func id of board, all right, dot children I, because you want to get each square, dot inner html is not equal to empty space. Okay, so we'll first do the function for delete actually. Okay, now if you guys remember, we have a function called delete over here. So if we select delete and we press on any particular square, if it has an element inside of it, it should like just vanish, right? So like say for example, I have 5 here, I put 5 over here. If I select delete and I go to 5, it should just remove 5, right? So we'll make this delete function first because like it's just easier that way. Okay. And num to add is equal to del, which means that if we select delete, should be double equal to, right? Yeah, double equal to del. What can we do? We can First of all, set this to empty, funcid board.inner.html, right? Because we are emptying as to what was there. Inner HTML is equal to empty. Now after that, we can remove classless.remove. We can remove solve color. As you can see by this, what I mean is that over here, when we add an element, it has a green color attached to it, right? So when we remove the element, we also want this green color to go away. So we'll remove the class solve color, which will also take the green color away. Okay, then I'll just do board of index 1 and index 2 is equal to 0. Okay, we'll modify this board of ours to 0. All right, now we'll check as if we want to insert an element. All right, now as I said, before we insert an element, we have to check as to if it follows the rules of Sudoku or not. Okay, so we'll make a separate function for that to make sure it follows the rules of Sudoku. Right, now that function will basically be called as check duplicates. Okay, so I'll go down. I'll just do function check duplicates. Now I won't be explaining as to how this works because as I mentioned in the beginning, I already have a video on this. So if you guys don't know how all this works, like how we check for duplicates and all that, make sure to check that video first and then come on to this video. Okay, for let I equal to 0, I less than 9, 9 plus plus. Alright, so I'll just be coding this out fast. I'll probably fast forward this entire bit. Alright, okay, so I finished making these two. Now this for loop will check if a number is being repeated in the same row. If it is, we'll like change fault one's value to 1 because it is being repeated on the same row, right? And fault 1 stands for that. If it is being repeated on the same column, we'll change the value of fault 2 to 1, right? Now we'll basically deal with if it is being repeated in the same subsquare or not. So over here, I finished checking in the same subsquare as well, right? If it is there in the same subsquare, we'll change the value of fault 3 to 1. Okay. Otherwise, if it is not being repeated anywhere, we'll just return true. Okay. Now that's basically it. Now let's go back to our function which we are doing. Okay. Now over here, we have to insert an element into the board. Now as I said, before inserting, we should check as to if it is being repeated. Right. So let's do that real quick. Let me just, okay. So let's leave a space. If check duplicates of board parse int num to add, we have to convert it to a string. If you remember, I mean, we have to convert to an integer. If you remember, then we will, okay, we'll just name a new variable called final indexes. All right, now our index 1 and index 2, right? We'll just put this inside final indexes so it's easier. Final indexes is equal to index 1 comma index 2. Okay, as simple as that. Now we'll check if the num that we have to add, or like the num that we're going to add, if it is being repeated or not. Now if it is not being repeated, it is equal to true, and num to add is not undefined, right? We don't want it to be undefined. Basically, we want to add a number only if a number is selected here. If no number is selected here, we don't want to add anything to the board. All right, so we'll check as if it's not undefined. And num to add is not equal to del. Now we can't add delete to the board, right? Like it makes no sense. So these are the conditions we have to check. If all these conditions are satisfied, then we'll just take this from here. We'll add the inner HTML to num to add. All right. Now after that, we'll just do dot class list dot add. We have to again add the solve color, right? We need to keep the green color back to it. Solve color. All right. Now we'll change the value in our board as well. Board of index 1, index 2 is equal to %, % of num to add. All right. So that is basically it for adding elements into our board. Let's see as if this works, right? Let's take our own board right here. I select 5, I put 5 here, and 5 is not being inserted for some reason. Let's go to inspect and see what's wrong. All right. Reading 23. Let's go over there and check. So it's having some issue over here. It can't read the ID, it says. Let's go check that again. Yeah, over here num ID should be 1n. Even over here board, the bracket should be over here. All right. And over here I believe it should be num ID mod 9 not equal to 0. Okay. Okay. Now it is also becoming an infinite loop, which means that it should be something. See, over here it should be j less than x into 3 plus 3, right? That will solve the issue of the infinite loop. So let's just go now and check. I want to insert 5 over here. And there you go, 5 is inserted, right? I want to insert over here, it works. Let's see if the delete option works. There you go, it works, right? Adding elements as we want. All right. So now this works, right? So what should we do next? Next, we should work about the warnings. Because if I try to insert 4 here, of course, it won't get inserted. But we want the warning to be shown, right? We want the warning to be shown. So what can we do? After this, we'll make a separate thing for that. Okay. Now we'll copy the same thing, this entire if statement. Let's just copy the header so we don't have to write that much. Right? Over here, now if this, while checking for duplicates, if it's equal to false, which means that if it is not a valid insertion, and we'll remove all this, and is solved is also equal to false, because you have to make sure that the board is not solved, right? If so, what can we do? Okay, so first thing what we have to do is, like you're supposed to understand one thing, right? Now say for example, I try to again insert 4 on the same row. We add the warning 1 animation class into our HTML so that the warning will be shown, right? But say for example, I go to insert 4 again in the same row. That class is already existent in the HTML, right? So it can't be added, and therefore the animation won't be shown. So the first thing we have to do is we have to remove all of the warning animation classes from our HTML. Okay, we'll start with that. First, remove all warning animation classes from HTML. So what I'll do is func ID, right? Warning one dot class list dot remove, right? Warning one anim, warn one anim. Now this removes the warning one animation from HTML entirely. We'll do the same thing for the rest, right? Now here I'll do warning 2 anim, warning 3 anim. We'll change these also accordingly. Okay. Now there's one more thing, right? After we remove all the animations, we need there to be a sleep option. Okay. Now what I mean by sleep option is, see, if we remove all the animations and we again add the animations instantly, like it basically means like it will not be observable to us, right? So because of that, we'll just do await sleep one. Okay. Now sleep one is basically a function that we have to make. We have to deal with that as well. Okay. So we'll make the function sleep one. Now to use the await keyword, our function over here, it should be an async function, right? Only then can we use the await keyword. Now let's make sleep one. So function sleep one, what should I do? What should I do? It should return a new promise, right? That will resolve this entire thing to a 25 millisecond delay. So we'll do set timeout resolve 25. So now basically what this does is that it basically stops the entire code for like 25 milliseconds. Okay, like that's basically it. We are making a promise that returns a timeout for 25 milliseconds. So over here we'll do await sleep one. So after we remove all the animations, we'll wait for a while. Now after we wait for a while, we can basically enter in the required animations, right? So what we can do is, if fault one is equal to 0, I mean it's equal to 1, we have to check if it's selected, right? Now if there is a fault one, what can we do? Func ID of warning one dot class list dot, okay, over here, all right, dot class list dot add, you have to add the animation warn one anim, right? Now after we do this, we'll set fault one equal to 0, right? Because we already informed the user of his or her fault. Now we'll go forward and we'll do this to the rest. Here if fault 2, here fault 3. Similarly, update the rest. Warning 2, warning 3. Even here fault 2, fault 3. Alright, now this should work. Let's see if it works. Say for example, I put 5 here. If I repeat 5 on the same row, as you can see, number is being repeated in the same row. You can adjust the font, okay? I'm just showing you the basics of how it works. Like you're completely free to build it from here. Okay, now let's say we want to input it on the same column. As you can see, number is being repeated in the same column, right? Now say for example, we input it in the same subsquare. Number is being repeated in the same subsquare. There you go, right? So now basically all our errors are being shown, right? Now we have to basically figure out the solve and the speed solve operations, right? So inside our VS Code over here, after we check for all the faults, we have to redirect the buttons to their suitable functions, right? So func ID of solver, if somebody selects solver, we should add an event listener first of all. If somebody clicks on solver, then we want to call the function called solve1. Okay, now the solve1 is basically for solve, okay, like which is the normal solve. Okay, and speed solve will get solved instantly. All right, so the same thing I'll do for the other one. func id for speed up, which is our other button which we have. For this, I'll call solve2. All right. Now in solve1, as I said, we are going to leave a 25 millisecond delay, right, after each number is inserted or deleted. Now for that, we need to use an async function because we can use this return promise thing right here only if we use an async function, right, to use the await keyword. So async function solve1, right? So again, like this function, what I'm solving, it is basically a part of how you solve Sudoku. So if you're not sure how to do that, make sure you check my other video out. The card is, as always, in the top right corner. Okay, so I'll just speed up through this. Now over here, we are using a function called find empty space to find empty spaces. Okay, like we'll make that function right now before we move on so that we don't forget. Okay, so we'll make a function for finding the empty space. So we'll do here, let's move after this, function find empty space. All right, so for let I equal to 0, I less than 9, I plus plus. Okay, we have our nested loop right here. Now if board of I of j is equal to 0, then we basically return ing in ls format, right? Otherwise, we just return none. All right, I don't think they have that. Is this required? Well, no need of this then, like it's fine. All right, and that's basically it. Right, we made this function. So now let's move on to our solving function. Okay, so now we did up till here. Now, as I said, while backtracking, okay, while we do this solution, while we backtrack, what should we do? We should remove all our solve colors and add the solve color after that. So as I said earlier, like for the warnings, what happens? We first remove all the warning clauses from HTML and then we add them again, right? Similarly, for this, we'll remove the solve color clause and we'll add them again just so that we can see the color being changed. All right, so over here I'll do func id of board, right, dot children final int dot class list dot remove solve color. All right, now after I do this, let's leave some spaces. After I do this, what can we do? We have to leave some space, or like we should basically wait for a while, right? So I'll just call await sleep one, right? So we wait for a while before changing the color again, so it just becomes observable. Now we'll just copy this down here. Dot class list here, instead of dot remove, it should be dot add, right? And then we should change the value dot inner HTML should be equal to I. Right. That's basically it. Now after that, you have to mention the backtracking bit. If await solve1. Now this is basically to make sure that the backtracking also happens after we wait for a while. Okay, just so that it's observable. Return true. Board empty 0 empty 1 equal to 0. Now let's see as to if this works. Okay, I really want to see as to if this works. But before that, we have a few more things. Over here, func ID of board. Okay. Of board dot children 0 dot inner HTML is equal to board of 0 0. Now this is basically for an exceptional case. Okay, this is basically an exceptional case what we are doing, because the beginning element of the board will not be considered in this, right? Like the element at 0 comma 0. So we'll make a separate thing for that, and at the end we'll just do return false for the recursive bit. All right, let's see as if this works. Let's insert random elements. Let's go to solve, and there you go. You can see it working, right? It works. Now there's some small issue here. When we do this, right? Let's insert some random elements. While backtracking, the colors are not necessarily being changed as such. I think the issue is that we are not calling this after the backtracking bit as well. Let's call this again over here and see. I think this should solve the issue. Let's again do some random stuff. 666. Let's just solve. And there you go. As you can see, now the colors are being completely removed while the backtracking bit happens. Right? Yeah. So like the reason for that is that while the recursion happens, right, it goes only up till here, then it recursively, like it goes back to the header of the function, right? But only when backtracking happens, it will exit this particular condition and go down. When it goes down, while backtracking, it should also satisfy this particular condition in which we remove our solve color and we add it again. Okay, now this is basically it for solve1. Now for speed solve, it's basically the exact same thing, right? We have to just remove the async bits. So let's copy this. All right, let's go down. Let's go here, solve2. Let's remove all the async bits from here. All right, that's done. Now what? Where else we use async? Don't have to use sleep here. Like we don't need any of this. Because we are not, it's like we don't want to see the change happening, right? We just want to change the color to green when we are adding one element. So we'll just do that. So whenever an element is being added while solving, we'll just add the solve color to it. Okay, we'll just await from everywhere. Again, over here, we don't need this. We don't need any of this as well, I guess. Right? Let's see as if this works. Let's go here, put random numbers. Let's do speed solve. Okay, speed solve is also doing the async bit. Let's see why that is. Okay, so you forgot to add an element here. Now, while we insert an element, we also have to add it to our board, right? So what can we do here? Let's do func ID of board itself dot children dot final int dot inner HTML, because we want the number to be shown is equal to I. Right. Now let's go down. It's okay. Over here should be solve2, not solve1. No wonder it was going slowly. Let's copy the solve color thing as well. Okay. While backtracking, we want the color to be green, and we also want the element to be 0, right? Because like that's basically how backtracking works. Make sure you guys know how to solve the Sudoku board. All right. Now let's see. Let's input random numbers. Let's see, speed solved. And there you go, it's solved. So that's it. That is the basic idea of how my Sudoku solver works. Now, again, like this might not be in the exact same way as to how I made mine. You can change this according to your own will. Okay, like I just showed you the framework as to how you can make it. So as you can see, it works. Now that is basically how you make a Sudoku solver like this. All right. Now that's it for this video. The entire code for this will be in the description down below. Okay, like it'll be in my GitHub. So make sure to check that out if you want. And that's it for this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.